Welcome to our Watch App course from Edgeonics. My name is Brett, and in this lesson we're going to see how to push data into our glance. So I'm going to go ahead and run the current glance so we can see where we left off and kind of discuss what we're going to do next. Alright, so here's our current glance. Everything is static, and if I click, of course, we'll go into our app. So what we want to do in this case is go ahead and start picking up some data in the glance controller. So we're going to use a timer to, it might be the way that we're actually polling our source on the watch. So remember, the watch is getting data from the iOS app. We don't need to go back to the iOS app. We can go ahead and get data on the watch that it has as current, use that data, and then display it in the glance. And the timer is what we're going to use to periodically go and get that data. So what we need to do is set that timer up. It's going to run on an interval. I probably will do something fast, like maybe every 5 seconds to start off. But in the real world, you may only do this every 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And we'll see how to change it so that you can make it a little bit longer for the real world scenario. So one of the first things I want to do is show how to get the data from the glance into the watch app. Now inside the glance, I am going to put in a wake with context the method that we're going to use to go ahead and put the data so that it's available for the WatchKit extension. So I'm going to do an update user activity, and I'll accept this one. So we're going to do this type that is going to be a reverse domain string. So it's going to be something like com dot maybe glance, and then this is just going to send in the latest stadium updates. Schedule update. And for our dictionary, we can do something like this. All right, so for the, actually I think this will work. And so for the key, I'm going to have G key with the capital K for glance key. And so the data, which is actually this data here. And what I can do is create variables for these and then put them into here as one variable. So I'm going to take these out, and that right there is actually going to be the date along with the team. So I'm just going to do let play date, and this will be play date. And so stadium is going to be this. So I'll do let stadium and do stadium here. Now for this down here, I can just do this. So I'll have play date, and then I can do, actually I didn't want that to go down there. I want to do a comma, let's see, right here, and do stadium. And close. For web page, we're not going to do that here right now. This is actually for handoff, so we're not doing anything with that at this time. Okay, so this is getting the data out of the glance, and what we want to do is catch it on the iPhones, the WatchKit extension side. And for this, we're going to have a method that we're going to add. I guess we can put this, let's see, we can put it in our controller since we have all of that going on down here, and I'll just call it, I'll do a mark, this is for glance data. And so we're going to have a function that's going to be handle user activity. And let's see, I want to do this one here, remote notification. Or actually, I'm just going to do this one. And I'll print coming from glance. So we have our user data, and I'm going to print that out. Close, and now we'll have our stadium name. So that's going to be a label. We'll set the text, and that's actually going to be our key. So we'll have user info, we'll get our G key out, and we need to cast this as a string. Xcode is going to want some kind of unwrapping or something here. I know this is a string. We don't need a force unwrap. We can do optional on this because it's not, again, it's a string. It's not going to be nil. So let's see if that is correct. So it wants to force unwrap, but we don't want to do that. I think what's going to happen is just going to go in a circle. It's going to force unwrap. Then it's going to say, oh, it's just force unwrapping user info. So that's fine. And I think we're ready to run our glance. So we should see our data come through in the WatchKit extension whenever we go into it. So I am going to go ahead and run this glance now. And let's see what happens. All right, so here comes the glance. There it is. So if I don't have my, well, here's, yeah, my stadium is there. So if I click, all right, so here it is. Coming from glance, we have angels. So here's our data that's outputting there. That looks good. And let's see, let's go back to our watch. So here's our data coming from our glance. So we might want to multi-line that. I don't know if we did that or not. Let's see. For that label, which is going to be up here, this, see if we have any kind of multi-line. No, we don't. So let's try that. See if it makes any kind of difference in the appearance and maybe removes that ellipse. So this is going to start the glance. We'll go into our Watch app. Yeah, that makes a little bit of difference. We could probably go 3 lines with that. I think that's what we'll do. So we'll do that, but we're going to do a few other things along the way. So here we are. We'll do 3 lines. Again, this is in the attribute inspector for that label. Now we can go ahead, implement our timer. So that's the next piece we're going to do. That's going to go inside the glance. And the first thing I want to do is create a class level variable for this timer. I'm going to do a var interval timer and set this to an NS timer like that. Okay, so now what we need is to create a function that we can call for each time the timer kicks off. So we're going to set it to an interval, and this function is going to get called. And I'm just going to call this start timer. And so in here is where we're going to define our interval. So I'm going to do interval timer and assign that through NS timer. And then I'm going to do scheduled timer with time interval. And I think I'm not getting a hint because I have that misspelled. So let's try now, scheduled timer with time interval. And let's see, there's 2 here, and let's see which one do I want the one with user info, the second one, and it's got the repeats on it because we do want this to repeat. So that is the one that I'm choosing, which was the second one in the list there. All right, so to make this a little bit more readable, I think I'm going to put each one of these on a line and do it like this. So that's a little bit more readable. All right, so our interval here is actually in seconds, so I am going to start off with, I guess we can do 2 seconds, just so we don't have to hang around and wait, because all I'm going to do is have it print out each time the interval kicks off. All right, so the object is self, and the selector is a method we're going to use. So this method is update timer data, and I am going to end it with a colon because that signifies a parameter. We're not actually going to have a parameter. It's going to be an empty parameter, but we need that for our selector. So the info is going to be nil. The repeats is going to be true. And I'll create this function now. This will be update timer data. So this is our function. There's an empty parameter there, so I can do a print and just do timer happening. All right, so that should take care of it. I think earlier I said this is going to kick off every time the interval fires, but it's actually going to be this method here that's going to kick off every time the interval fires, which is every 2 seconds. So one thing we need to do is set timer. Let's see, start timer. And we can go ahead with our glance. So what we're going to see here is down here in our debug, that should print. And so we'll know our timer is working. And basically we could go and get data from whatever source we have and bring it into our glance, then feed it to our, let's see here, we got an issue. We could feed it to our watch extension. So the error that we're getting here, let's see, watch terminating app uncaught NS argument exceptions. So I think I might have a name wrong. Yes, unrecognized selector update timer data. And I may have misspelled that update timer data. Actually, I see. So what I need to do is pass in this timer and NS timer. So that's the way that will work. And I have this here. So that does signify I need the one parameter is what this is doing, this colon. So let me try this now. So I had that incorrect. And hopefully this time it runs and we'll get our consistent 2-second print out that never ends. As long as this glance is open, so there it is. Every 2 seconds that'll print out. And if we click, then we'll get back into our extension, and here's our data coming from our extension. You can see in the background that the timer continues to poll, and I've got the app stopped now, but it will continue to look and get the latest data from whatever source you're using. So right here, you could grab whatever it is that is the data source and continue to grab that data and supply it to the glance. And again, if you want to change this interval to something different, you can just do like 5 seconds. If you want to change it to minutes, this is all in seconds, so you would just go ahead and do the calculation for minutes. So for 10 minutes, for example, you would do 600 right here, so it'd be like this. And this is a double, so don't forget to include your decimal as well. And as far as trying to capture what the user's doing within the glance, so that you kind of pause here in the glance, because you'll notice we immediately go into the app and there's no hanging around the glance. We're in the app and we can do things. We're in the Watch app and we can do things there. We can handle events. We have the event handler here, but you don't have something like that in the glance. So the user either looks at this glance or they tap it and they go into the app, but you can't really intercept that whenever the user triggers that. So that is how you can get more dynamic data into your glance.